From a real lion living in a strip club to mattresses becoming murder weapons, Black Samson packed more bizarre surprises than any blaxploitation hero should. This forgotten Warner Bros. Gem featured fake graffiti made by crew members insulting each other, a stuntman-turned-director's wild debut, and the strangest casting coincidence that changed martial arts cinema forever. Fact 1. Real lion lived in strip club. Most movie productions use trained animals that show up for a few scenes and then return to their handlers, but Black Samson took things to an entirely different level. The 1974 blaxploitation film featured a genuine African lion named Hoodoo, who actually lived inside the main character's nightclub throughout the entire production. This wasn't just a brief cameo or a few carefully choreographed shots. The lion was a permanent resident of the strip club set, casually lounging on tables right next to the stage where topless dancers performed their routines. The decision to house a live lion in what was essentially a working nightclub set created one of the most surreal filming environments in cinema history. While the club's patrons drank and watched the entertainment, Hoodoo would lie there like an oversized house cat, completely unbothered by the constant activity around him. The production team had to work around the lion's presence during every single club scene, which meant actors, dancers, and crew members were all performing their jobs with a massive predator just a few feet away. What makes this arrangement even more remarkable is that the lion wasn't just a prop or background decoration, he was considered Samson's actual pet and protector in the story. The character of Samson, played by Rockne Tarkington, owned this topless bar and used his lion as both a conversation piece and an implied threat to anyone who might cause trouble. The filmmakers committed so completely to this concept that they literally built their entire set around accommodating a real lion's daily living situation, creating what might be the only strip club in movie history where the most dangerous thing wasn't the bouncers, but the 400-pound African cat watching everything from his favorite table. Fact 2. Enter the Dragon connection gone wrong. Rockne Tarkington was originally cast to play Williams, one of the three main heroes in Bruce Lee's legendary martial arts film Enter the Dragon, but he unexpectedly dropped out just days before the production was scheduled to begin filming in Hong Kong in 1973. This last-minute departure completely changed the course of martial arts cinema history and indirectly led to the creation of Black Samson the following year. The role of Williams was supposed to be Tarkington's big break into major Hollywood action films, but when he suddenly backed out of the project, the producers found themselves scrambling to find a replacement with only days to spare. Producer Fred Weintraub knew that karate champion Jim Kelly had a training studio in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles, so he hastily arranged a meeting with Kelly to see if he could fill the role. Weintraub was immediately impressed with Kelly's screen presence and martial arts skills, and Kelly was cast in the film on the spot. This casting change turned out to be a career-defining moment for Jim Kelly, who became one of the biggest stars of the blaxploitation and martial arts genres after his memorable performance alongside Bruce Lee and John Saxon. Kelly's success in Enter the Dragon led to a 3-film deal with Warner Bros. And launched him into starring roles in movies like Black Belt Jones and 3 the Hard Way. Meanwhile, Tarkington had to find other projects to showcase his talents, which eventually led him to the title role in Black Samson. Interestingly, both Tarkington and William Smith, who played the villain in Black Samson, were originally considered for roles in Enter the Dragon, making their collaboration in the 1974 film an unexpected reunion of actors who had both been connected to Bruce Lee's masterpiece. Fact 3. Stuntman's directorial debut disaster. Chuck Bale was known throughout Hollywood as the man of action, long before he ever sat in a director's chair. Having built his reputation as one of the most reliable stuntmen in the business during the 1960s and early 70s. Standing at an imposing 6 feet 4 inches tall, Bale worked as the stunt double for Max Baer Jr. on the Beverly Hillbillies and for Peter Breck on The Big Valley, while also appearing as various criminal henchmen on the classic Batman television series, where he threw punches at the dynamic duo on behalf of villains like Mr. Freeze, Catwoman, the Penguin, and the Riddler. His extensive background in coordinating dangerous stunts and fight scenes made him a natural choice when Warner Bros. Decided to give him a chance to direct his first feature film, but Black Samson proved that jumping from stunt work to directing wasn't as easy as it looked. Bale had spent years working with director Richard Rush on films like Getting Straight and Freebie and the Bean, learning the filmmaking process from behind the camera But when it came time to handle every aspect of a production himself, the results were mixed at best. Many critics and viewers noted that while the action sequences in Black Samson were expertly choreographed thanks to Bale's stunt background, the pacing throughout the rest of the film suffered significantly. The dramatic scenes often felt slow and poorly structured, suggesting that Bale's expertise with cars, fights, and physical comedy didn't automatically translate to directing actors in quieter moments or managing the overall flow of a story. Despite these growing pains, Bale went on to direct several more films including Cleopatra Jones and The Casino of Gold and The Gumball Rally, eventually finding his footing as a director while never losing his reputation as one of Hollywood's premier stuntmen. Fact 4. Fake graffiti crew insults. The urban graffiti that appears throughout Black Samson's inner-city backgrounds wasn't created by actual street artists or even hired graphic designers, but rather by the film's own stagehands, who decided to use the movie's walls as their personal message board for insulting each other. What was supposed to look like authentic 1970s street art instead became a collection of crew members poking fun at their co-workers, and if you pause the film during certain scenes, you can clearly read messages like "Paul eats," followed by a crude word that definitely wouldn't have appeared in real neighborhood graffiti of that era. This behind-the-scenes joke became an unintentional time capsule of the film's production, preserving the playful rivalry between crew members who were apparently more interested in roasting each other than creating believable urban atmosphere. The graffiti appears most prominently during the outdoor scenes where Samson walks through his neighborhood, and eagle-eyed viewers have spotted numerous other amusing messages that the stagehands spray-painted onto building walls between takes. The fake nature of the graffiti becomes even more obvious when you consider that most of it looks far too clean and deliberately placed compared to the organic, chaotic style of real street art from that time period. While authentic 1970s graffiti would have been layered, weathered, and often partially covered by newer tags, the Black Samson graffiti appears fresh and perfectly readable, as if someone had just finished painting it moments before the cameras rolled. What makes this detail particularly entertaining is that the crew members apparently felt so confident that viewers wouldn't pause to examine the background details that they didn't bother censoring their jokes or making them less obvious. The result is a movie where careful observers can essentially eavesdrop on the private conversations and workplace humor of a film crew from 50 years ago. Fact 5. Greek actor as Italian mobster. Titos Vandis, the Greek character actor who played Joseph Nappa, the Italian crime family patriarch in Black Samson, was so obviously miscast in the role that even contemporary viewers immediately noticed the cultural mismatch. Vandis was born in Greece in 1917 and had built his career playing distinctly Greek characters, most famously as Father Karras's uncle in The Exorcist just 1 year before Black Samson was released, where his authentic Greek accent and mannerisms were perfectly suited to the role. The casting decision becomes even more puzzling when you consider that Vandis had spent most of his American career on Broadway and in films specifically playing Greek shipping magnates, restaurant owners, and other Mediterranean characters where his natural accent and cultural background were assets rather than obstacles. He had originated roles in musicals like Ilya Darling and On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, where his Greek heritage was central to his characters, making his sudden transformation into an Italian mob boss particularly jarring for audiences familiar with his previous work. What makes this casting choice especially amusing is that Vandis didn't even attempt to modify his distinctly Greek accent or mannerisms for the Italian crime boss role, essentially playing Joseph Nappa as if he were just another Greek character who happened to be involved in organized crime. His delivery of lines about family honor and criminal territory sounded more like a character from Zorba the Greek than The Godfather, creating an unintentionally comedic effect that undermined the film's attempts at creating a menacing criminal organization. Despite being completely wrong for the part, Vandis threw himself into the role with such enthusiasm that many viewers felt he managed to make the character work through sheer force of personality, even if nobody believed for a second that he was actually Italian. Fact 6. Warner Brothers found after filming. Black Samson was completely filmed, edited, and ready for theaters for an entire month before the filmmakers managed to secure Warner Brothers as their distributor, revealing just how uncertain and chaotic the production process had been from start to finish. This unusual situation meant that the cast and crew had wrapped all their work. The final cut was sitting on someone's shelf, and yet nobody knew when or if audiences would ever get to see the movie they had just spent months creating. Most Hollywood productions begin with a distribution deal already in place, where major studios like Warner Brothers agree to release the film before cameras even start rolling, providing financial security and marketing support throughout the entire filmmaking process. The fact that Black Samson was made without any distribution guarantee suggests that the producers were either extremely confident in their product or simply desperate to get the movie made, regardless of the business risks involved. During that month-long limbo period, the filmmakers were essentially shopping around a completed blaxploitation film to various studios, trying to convince someone that a movie about a nightclub owner with a pet lion was worth investing in for theatrical release. The uncertainty must have been particularly stressful for the cast and crew, who had no idea whether their work would end up in major theaters, drive-ins, or forgotten entirely in some studio vault. When Warner Brothers finally agreed to distribute the film, it represented a significant victory for the independent producers who had taken the enormous financial risk of creating a complete movie without any guaranteed way to get it to audiences. The studio's decision to pick up Black Samson also demonstrated their confidence in the blaxploitation genre during the mid-1970s, when films featuring black action heroes were proving to be profitable investments for major distributors. Fact 7. Mattress Murder. Weapon Finale. The climactic battle sequence in Black Samson features one of the most unusual neighborhood defense strategies ever captured on film, where the entire community transforms into an army of improvised warriors, using their own furniture and household items as weapons against the invading mobsters. When William Smith's character Johnny Napa and his crew arrive in Samson's neighborhood for the final confrontation, the local residents suddenly emerge onto every rooftop, fire escape, and window ledge in the area, armed with whatever they could carry from their apartments and houses. What follows is an absolutely surreal rain of domestic items, as the neighbors begin hurling mattresses, chairs, tables, doors, and various pieces of junk down onto the street below, creating a bizarre urban battlefield where everyday household objects become instruments of community justice. The most memorable moment occurs when someone manages to push an entire refrigerator off a rooftop, using the large appliance as a murder weapon, in what might be the only film in history to feature death by kitchen equipment dropped from multiple stories above. The scene becomes even more extraordinary when the residents begin chanting, "Samson, Samson!" in unison while continuing their assault with mattresses and furniture, creating a mythic atmosphere that transforms an ordinary street into something resembling an ancient arena where the hero must face his enemies. The filmmakers somehow managed to coordinate this massive sequence where dozens of extras had to carry heavy furniture up to rooftops and then throw it down at precisely the right moments to create the illusion of a spontaneous neighborhood uprising. What makes this finale particularly impressive is that all of this furniture-throwing mayhem was apparently filmed on location in a real Los Angeles neighborhood, meaning the production had to arrange for countless household items to be safely dropped from actual buildings, while cameras captured the action from multiple angles below. Fact 8. Allen Toussaint's forgotten score. Allen Toussaint, the legendary New Orleans rhythm and blues composer who had already created hits like Lady Marmalade for La Belle and would later work with Paul McCartney and Wings, provided the complete musical score for Black Samson. But despite his incredible reputation and the film's Warner Brothers distribution, no official soundtrack album was ever released to the public. This represents one of the most significant lost opportunities in blaxploitation music history, considering that Toussaint was at the peak of his creative powers in 1974 and had just finished producing some of the most influential soul and funk records of the decade. The soundtrack featured vocals by Willie West, a talented New Orleans rhythm and blues singer who worked closely with Toussaint during the recording sessions, creating what many music historians consider to be some of the most authentic and groove-heavy music ever composed for a blaxploitation film. West's powerful voice, combined with Toussaint's sophisticated arrangements and legendary keyboard work, should have resulted in a soundtrack that competed with classics like Shaft and Superfly, but instead the music remained trapped within the film itself. What makes this situation even more frustrating for music collectors is that Toussaint also incorporated members of the Meters, his house band, and one of the most respected funk groups in music history, into various tracks throughout the score. The combination of Toussaint's production genius, West's vocal talent, and the meter's rhythmic expertise created a musical foundation that was arguably too good for the low-budget film it was supporting. Modern music enthusiasts have created unofficial compilations of the soundtrack by extracting audio directly from the film, but these fan-made versions can only capture fragments of what should have been a complete album, showcasing some of Toussaint's most underrated work during his most productive period. Fact 9. Both Enter the Dragon stars cast. Both Rockne Tarkington and William Smith were originally intended to play two of the three main heroes in Enter the Dragon alongside Bruce Lee, creating one of the most remarkable casting coincidences in film history when they ended up starring opposite each other as hero and villain in Black Samson instead. Tarkington was set to play Williams, the karate expert who becomes one of Lee's allies on the mysterious island, while Smith was originally considered for the role of Roper, the gambling-addicted martial artist who joins the tournament to pay off his debts to dangerous creditors. The fact that both actors were dropped from what would become one of the most influential martial arts films ever made meant that their paths crossed again in the much smaller budget world of blaxploitation cinema, where they found themselves on opposite sides of a very different kind of action movie. This casting shuffle essentially created an alternate universe version of Enter the Dragon, where viewers could imagine what Bruce Lee's classic might have looked like if these two actors had remained in their original roles. Smith's consideration for the Roper character is particularly interesting because that role eventually went to John Saxon, and Smith's imposing physical presence and natural intensity would have created a completely different dynamic in the film's climactic scenes. Meanwhile, Tarkington's departure from the Williams role opened the door for Jim Kelly to make his career-defining performance, launching him into blaxploitation stardom. The reunion of these two almost Enter the Dragon stars in Black Samson gives the 1974 film an unexpected connection to martial arts cinema history, turning what could have been just another low-budget action movie into a fascinating glimpse at how different casting decisions can completely reshape the entertainment landscape and create unexpected second chances for actors who missed out on legendary roles. Fact 10. Real mortuary location. The mortuary scenes in Black Samson were filmed at the actual South Los Angeles mortuary located at 1020 West 94th Street, where the filmmakers used a genuine working funeral home as the setting for one of the movie's most important criminal operations. This decision to shoot in a real mortuary rather than building a set gave the film an authentically eerie atmosphere that would have been impossible to recreate in a studio, but it also meant that the cast and crew were filming their scenes in a place where actual funeral services were being conducted for real families in the community. The mortuary serves as the front operation for a drug dealer in the film, creating a darkly ironic situation where a business dedicated to honoring the dead becomes the headquarters for criminals who are essentially dealing death in a different form through their narcotics trade. The choice to use this particular location was especially bold considering that mortuaries are generally considered sacred spaces by the communities they serve, and filming a crime movie in an active funeral home could have easily caused controversy or offended local residents. What made this location even more remarkable was that the South Los Angeles mortuary allowed the production to film both interior and exterior scenes, giving the filmmakers complete access to examine rooms, preparation areas, and other spaces that the general public would never normally see. The authenticity of the setting added a genuine sense of unease to scenes, where characters conduct illegal business surrounded by the tools and atmosphere of the funeral industry. The mortuary's cooperation with the film production also demonstrates how some local businesses in the 1970s were willing to participate in Hollywood productions, even when those films depicted their establishments as fronts for criminal activity, perhaps recognizing the economic benefits of hosting a movie production in their neighborhood. Fact 11. Biblical Samson. Historical symbol. The character of Black Samson draws from a fascinating piece of American history where 19th-century abolitionists deliberately reimagined the biblical hero Samson as a black man to create a powerful symbol of African-American strength and resistance against oppression. While the original Old Testament doesn't specify Samson's race or physical appearance, anti-slavery activists began portraying him as black in their writings and speeches, transforming the story of a man who single-handedly fought against his enemies into a metaphor for the collective struggle of enslaved people against their oppressors. This reinterpretation became so widespread that by the late 1800s, the term Black Samson had evolved into a recognized reference to the combined power and determination of freed African Americans who were fighting for their rights and dignity in post-Civil War America. The biblical Samson's famous destruction of the Philistine temple by pulling down its supporting pillars became a symbolic representation of how oppressed people could bring down the systems that enslaved them through unity, righteous anger. Historical records from colonial America reveal that many enslaved African men were actually named Samson by their owners, though historians note that slaveholders probably didn't intend to connect these individuals to the biblical hero's story of resistance and liberation. The 19th century abolitionists, however, recognized the ironic potential in this naming pattern and deliberately embraced it as part of their campaign to reframe biblical stories in ways that supported their cause. When the 1974 film adopted the title Black Samson, it was tapping into more than a century of cultural symbolism that connected the biblical strongman to African American experiences of fighting against powerful enemies. The movie's portrayal of a community leader using his strength to protect his neighborhood from outside threats directly echoed these historical themes of resistance and collective empowerment. Fact 12. Andy Griffith, show pioneer. Rockne Tarkington holds the distinction of being the first black actor to receive screen credit on The Andy Griffith Show and remains the only African-American performer to ever have a speaking role during the series' entire 8-year run from 1960 to 1968. This achievement is particularly remarkable considering that The Andy Griffith Show was set in the fictional town of Mayberry, North Carolina, during a time period when the American South was still deeply segregated and most television shows were reluctant to feature black actors in anything other than background roles or stereotypical characters. Tarkington's groundbreaking appearance on the show represented a small but significant step forward in television representation during the early 1960s, when major networks were just beginning to acknowledge that their programming needed to reflect the changing social landscape of America. The fact that he was given actual dialogue, rather than just appearing as an extra, demonstrates that the show's producers were willing to push against the conventional boundaries of what was considered acceptable for mainstream television at that time. What makes this achievement even more impressive is that The Andy Griffith Show was one of the most popular programs on television during its run, consistently ranking in the top 10 most-watched shows and reaching millions of American households every week. Tarkington's presence on such a widely viewed series meant that his performance was seen by audiences across the country, including many viewers who rarely encountered black actors in speaking roles on their television screens. This early television work established Tarkington as a pioneering figure in the entertainment industry, long before he became known for his blaxploitation film roles, proving that his career was built on breaking barriers and creating opportunities for representation in multiple areas of popular culture. Fact 13. Quarterstaff car problems. Samson's signature weapon, a massive African-style quarterstaff topped with a carved lion's head, created an unexpected logistical challenge throughout the entire film because the ornate wooden club was simply too tall to fit inside any standard automobile with the roof closed. This meant that Rockne Tarkington had to drive with his sunroof open during every single driving scene, allowing the top portion of his ceremonial staff to stick out through the roof like some kind of bizarre automotive antenna while he navigated the streets of Los Angeles. The quarterstaff, which served as both Samson's symbol of authority and his primary weapon for fighting off criminals, was designed to look impressive and intimidating, but the prop department apparently didn't consider how the character would actually transport such a large object in everyday situations. The result was a series of driving scenes that looked slightly ridiculous, as viewers could see this elaborate wooden staff protruding from the sunroof of what was otherwise a perfectly normal 1970s sedan. This practical problem became even more noticeable during action sequences where Samson had to make quick getaways or chase scenes because the staff's visibility made it impossible for him to blend in with regular traffic or attempt any kind of subtle pursuit. The weapon essentially turned his car into a moving billboard that announced his presence to everyone on the road, which seems counterproductive for someone trying to fight crime in an urban environment. What makes this detail particularly amusing is that the filmmakers apparently decided it was more important to maintain the visual impact of Samson carrying his impressive quarterstaff than to find a more practical weapon that would actually fit inside a car, leading to dozens of scenes where basic transportation became an unintentionally comedic challenge for the hero. Fact 14. Old Lion's limited performance. Hoodoo the Lion, despite being prominently featured in the film's marketing materials and serving as Samson's supposed secret weapon against criminals, was consistently described by viewers as old and completely inactive throughout the entire movie. never once participating in any of the action sequences or actually threatening the villains who invaded his territory. The lion spent most of his screen time lying motionless on tables inside the strip club, looking more like an oversized house cat taking a nap than a fearsome predator that might spring into action to defend his owner. This lack of participation became particularly noticeable during scenes where criminals directly threatened Samson or caused trouble inside the nightclub, because audiences naturally expected the lion to react aggressively to protect his territory or his human companion. Instead, Hoodoo remained completely indifferent to the violence and conflict happening just a few feet away from him, maintaining his relaxed posture even when gunshots were fired or fights broke out in his immediate vicinity. The disconnect between the lion's billing as Samson's bouncer and his actual performance created an unintentionally comedic element throughout the film, as viewers kept waiting for a dramatic moment where the big cat would finally leap into action and maul some bad guys, only to watch him continue lounging peacefully while Samson handled all the fighting himself with his quarterstaff. Even during the climactic battle sequence, when the entire neighborhood was under attack, the lion apparently remained safely inside the club rather than joining the fight. This underwhelming performance suggests that the filmmakers either used an elderly lion who was too tired for action scenes, or they simply didn't have the budget or expertise necessary to safely choreograph sequences involving a 400-pound predator attacking human actors, leaving Hoodoo as more of an atmospheric prop than an actual character. Fact 15. Stunt Coordinator Hall of Fame. Chuck Bale achieved a unique form of Hollywood immortality when he appeared as Chuck Barton, the stunt coordinator in Richard Rush's critically acclaimed 1980 film, The Stuntman, essentially playing a fictionalized version of his own real-life career in what many consider one of the greatest movies ever made about the film industry. This casting decision was particularly meaningful because Bale had worked extensively with director Richard Rush on multiple projects throughout the 1970s, serving as stunt coordinator on films like Getting Straight and Freebie and The Bean, which gave him an intimate understanding of how Rush approached filmmaking. In The Stuntman, Bale's character, Chuck Barton, represents the practical, no-nonsense professional who keeps the dangerous action sequences running smoothly while the more artistic members of the crew focus on the creative aspects of movie making. The role allowed Bale to draw directly from his decades of experience, coordinating stunts for television shows like The Beverly Hillbillies and Batman, as well as his work on numerous action films, bringing an authentic voice to a character that could have easily become a Hollywood stereotype. What makes this performance even more remarkable is that The Stuntman starred Peter O'Toole and was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, including Best Director and Best Adapted Screenplay, meaning that Bale's portrayal of his own profession was featured in one of the most respected films of its era. The movie's complex exploration of reality versus illusion in filmmaking provided the perfect context for Bale to demonstrate how stunt coordinators serve as the bridge between impossible fictional scenarios and the practical realities of keeping actors safe while creating spectacular action sequences. This role essentially served as Bale's legacy project, preserving his expertise and personality for future generations, while celebrating the often overlooked contributions that stunt professionals make to the entertainment industry.